Pregame.com.
Virginia Tech at Wake Forest, Saturday, ACC action. I'm Marco D'Angelo, joined with Vegas Runner. VR, Virginia Tech, they suffered their first loss 2 weeks ago. They bounced back last week, but it wasn't in convincing fashion. What do you make off that game moving forward?
To tell you what I think of Virginia Tech, I think they're an overvalued team. The AP and the odds makers agree they're 19th, 20th in the country. But sitting at 5-1 straight up, they're only 1-5 against the spread. That tells me they're overvalued and underperforming. Wake Forest, on the flip side, they're 4-1 straight up and against the spread. You know, this team, no one's seeing them coming, and they're covering numbers. The thing with Virginia Tech is this send-out was at 7.5, but books put it up at 7. And they saw some sharp money on Wake Forest at 6.5. Because I think when this game goes off Saturday, books are going to need the Wake Forest side. I think Virginia Tech will be used in a lot of teasers, expecting them not to go down there and lose. But you got to be pretty careful. Wake Forest, 3 of their last 4 games that they were an underdog, they won straight up. And it was against quality teams. I mean, you know, they beat BC on the road. They beat Florida State at home. They beat NC State at home. They beat some good teams. The reason for that is simple. They used to be one-dimensional. You knew what you'd get with Wake Forest. They're going to run the ball. This year, I'm seeing some balance. They run and pass the ball. I think this is the kind of game that Virginia Tech can be in trouble, can kind of look past Wake Forest, even though they're 4-1, and kind of get a win, but not enough to cover that number.
Well, the passing is there. They're averaging like 300 yards a game throwing a ball, which is not typical Wake Forest football. I hear everything you've said about the overvalued, undervalued. I think, though, from last week, this is where we always talk about the regression to the means and stuff. I think now that Virginia Tech lost the game outright and had to come from behind to pull out a game. They were life and death last week with Miami and Florida. I think
makes sense.
I think the public is going to now say, okay, Virginia Tech's not that good, and then they're going to overreact to Wake Forest beating Florida State, which Florida State's
banged up, man. They got nothing left. And not to cut it, I agree with you. The more that's why I'm not going to go ahead and say this is my pick in the video, but it is a lean. Because if Virginia Tech did win convincingly last week, this probably would have been double digits.
Oh, it definitely would have been, because Florida State was banged up, was 10 last week.
Yeah.
I actually think this week we're getting value with Virginia Tech.
Yeah, you might be right.
And what I like is my question last week, and on one of the radio shows that I did, this was one of the games that the host wanted me to preview. I took Miami and Florida last week because I said generally when that team suffers that first loss,
it's a letdown.
It's a letdown situation. Your national
especially they had BCS aspirations because it was an easy road for them.
You're looking at a national championship possibility, and when they lose that, then you've got to hit. And what I said to the host of the show is, not only do you have to handicap nuts and bolts fundamentals of football, you got to handicap psyche. What's the Virginia Tech mental aspect? And to me, to not play their best game last week, they clearly were flat at the beginning of that game and still managed to pull that win out. I think that's a momentum builder going on the road. Accompany that with such a high for Wake Forest. Wake Forest doesn't care that Florida State was banged up. On their ledger, it's going to say, we beat Florida State.
Sure. The Florida State was 4th in the country when the season started,
I think the value is the Virginia Tech. I think the Virginia Tech defense is going to come to play this week after getting torched for 35 points last week. I like Virginia Tech. I think the quarterback showed some guts last week coming from behind to win that game, give him some confidence, because that was a lot of the big speculation is, when they got into a big game, he laid an egg against Clemson. There's no question about it.
You make perfect sense on the value side. The only reason I won't change my mind and probably end up passing is injuries on Virginia Tech. They lost 2 defensive tackles before the season kind of started, earlier in the season, let's put it that way. And for this week, they have a defensive end and another defensive tackle that's doubtful or questionable. That's a banged-up defensive line. And because of that, I can't say I'm willing to lay that touchdown here.
Well, this is just a regular play. I'm going to go ahead and give it. I'm going to take Virginia Tech.
I won't fade you.
I'm going to lay the 7.5 with Virginia Tech. I've got Virginia Tech winning 31-21. Call that my play. Did the best bet on a previous video. That's going to wrap it up for me this week on videos. VR is going to be up next. He's going to be doing some videos with Brian Leonard. So they'll have some college and pro and both of those guys' best bets. So stay tuned for those. Thanks for watching. I'm Marco D'Angelo. He's Vegas Runner.